Hello everyone, today we have a lot of things to update after we have had a massive crash on Bitcoin of over 20% from all-time high. And probably the biggest question that everybody's asking right now is, are we going more down to go fill this massive wick that we had, or are we potentially looking for a bounce? So this is what we're going to see in this video and try to understand what our possible next trades could be. So let's start with the fact that a week ago, I had literally told you to short Bitcoin at 126,000. That was literally all-time high. This was the trade that I had given. It was the simplest trade. We had an SFP right here of the high on the 4 hours, the most obvious SFP after hitting into a very important Fibonacci level. I clearly showed you that I had my entry at 125,700 and that I was $40,000 short. As you can see in my Discord, I had said we did hit a very strong Fibonacci level. If you want to take a very aggressive short, you could on the 4 hours close below the last high. Here's my entry. We had a little drop initially. Then I start warning my members that I start taking off spot positions. At this moment, Ethereum was trading at 4,500. And I'm telling them I'm quite heavy in USDT. I am short and chill. Will stay in my short for now. No longs. Staying short. I then give this short trade on Ethereum. And I said, took the short, 4,500. A massive follow through. Went to profit. But I did not close my short. Till we have a sign of strength, I'm not closing my short, expecting lower prices. Then we start having a bigger drop, Ethereum at 4,100, Bitcoin at 119,000. I said I would really love Sol at $150. At this time, Solana was trading at over $230. When I said that, of course, I sold a big part of my spot position right here. And I said this on the 10th of October at 6 p.m. 6 hours later, after we were literally trading at $224, we had a massive drop to $150 where I bought. And then as you probably saw, we had that massive drop on Bitcoin to about $102,000. And Ethereum followed through, touching 3,300, which by the way, in my old videos, was the area where I told you that I would have been interested in buying. And as you can see, I had my Ethereum position short from 4,500, which I'm still holding, where I realized $3,000 of profit and where I still have $1,000 open. And I have my Bitcoin short still from $125,000, where I took $2,400 of profit and I still have 1,000 open, which means that just with these shorts, I have made almost $8,000. And then of course I took a long at about 107, took some profit, and now I'm just letting this trade run. Then last thing that I want to show you, I even said last night, because a lot of people were asking me, should I buy altcoins now? Should I not buy altcoins? And I said, right now we're at a massive resistance on Ethereum. If we can reclaim it, of course, we can expect a bigger bounce, which means that also the altcoins would follow and have a bigger bounce. But I said, if not, I'm interested in adding on my short trade. And as we reach exactly this area that I had given, overnight, we actually had a massive drop. And of course, part of the positions that I had bought at 3,500, 3,300, I sold, obviously, to take some profit, as we are now heading more down. So finally, let's get into the actual charts. Sorry, one thing I did say was that I was expecting new lows on Bitcoin, but first I wanted a rally into 117, 118,000 for an opportunity to add on to the shorts. And why is that? At this 117, 118,000, we had a nice resistance on Bitcoin, which unfortunately has not been reached. But that does not mean that we cannot pump from here and eventually get there in order to take these highs and eventually reject here. And by the way, if this happens, I would still be interested in adding onto my short trade for such a trade to then maybe go and fill the wick, or perhaps this $96,000 target that I have been giving for a while if you've watched my older videos. So of course, as you can see, I have two alerts right here in case we go and do this movement where I would be interested in a short trade. Of course, context would change if from here we drop down, we fill the wick first below 100,000 and then we pump. Then in this case, this short trade would not interest me so much anymore. But if first we can get into the short trade, then I think we have an opportunity to bring this lower. So that's what's up with shorting the market. Regarding whether or not this wick will get filled, this is what I'm seeing. I see two options. Well, I see technically three options. So as you can see, as we trace this volume range, we did have a point of control, which initially seemed to hold right here. where we could have expected a little bit of a reversal. And I said Bitcoin at local support. Now, I don't really like it for a bounce here. Would prefer for the wick to be filled. Yes, this was support, but as you can see, it is not holding properly. And anyone who longed here is currently in a loss. How could we have prevented to long this level? And by the way, of course, this drop is also caused by the market, which is dropping at the moment. We do have this gap on the S&P where we could potentially look for a reversal, which could help on Bitcoin to reverse. But if we simply just keep on going down and make new lows, then we can expect Bitcoin to pretty much follow through. Anyways, the way that you could have avoided longing this point of control was just by looking at order flow. As we wait for this to load, let me also give you a new trade, which could potentially play out, even though it is not my favorite. And this would be the Fibonacci level at about 107, 106. So this area right here. And this is not simply based on the 618 and 66 of the Fibonacci retracement, but what is interesting here is that, well, first of all, perhaps we can time this with the gap fill that I just showed you on the stock market, but also if we go on the Bitcoin chart of Coinbase, you can see that the wick here was at 107,000. So this would also be in confluence with our Bybit chart where the wick was a bit lower. But if we are to fill this wick on the Coinbase, and at the same time perfectly align it with what we have on Bybit, then we would have the wick fill on Coinbase, and simply perhaps we could put a low at 106. By the way, we pretty much have the same thing on Binance, where you can see the wick only went to 107. So you would have, in this case, the wick fill on Binance, the wick fill on Coinbase, and then we would have this perfectly aligned Fibonacci level on Bybit. Anyways, unfortunately, my order flow actually expired today, right now actually. So I cannot show you why that trade would have not played out, but I'll just tell you because I checked it out before. Basically, when price reached right here, I think it was 20 or 30 million longs. So typically, as I've explained before, if you see a lot of longs opening at this level, that usually does not hold very well and it fuels more downside. So that was the reason why. Also keep in mind, I have not longed this level, but it could be interesting, I think, if we tap again this anchor VWAP, would also be best to reclaim the point of control, and then we could have a nice trade like this with an easy invalidation wherever the low is going to be, targeting perhaps the 117,000 that I had given as a short. And then obviously if we reclaim this level, then we can expect probably eventually an all-time high. So you could end up with a 1 to 6 trade if we get a setup that looks like this. However, as I said, this is not really my favorite option. Of course, same thing, if during New York Open, we fake out this little range right here, then we would have the same setup. But I would first like to see the reclaim of the value area low and of this point of control. And then I would be interested in taking potentially a trade. If not, if we bounce right now, then whatever, I missed the long trade. So as I said, this is an option. 107, 106 is an option, and keep in mind this is all reactionary. And even if so, I will still be interested in taking my short at 118,000 to eventually go and take this, where I will explain now, for a new long, and that would be at the fill of this wick. But what I would like to see is a tap below $100,000. So if we take out $100,000 psychological level, which would be right here, that would be really, really nice. Because as I've explained already in some videos, typically these psychological levels, they do tend to be taken out. So for example, $5,000 on Ethereum I was speaking about, $100,000 on Bitcoin. I don't know if you remember the $50 that I was expecting on Hype. 100,000 is a really big psychological level, which would be really nice to take out. Otherwise, if we just fill the wick, and for example SFP, and did not take out 100,000, then I would be interested even more in taking a short trade to then take it to 100,000. So I hope that's clear. I really want 100,000 to be taken out if we have to go down to these levels and fill this wick, okay? And then of course, the other option would be this $96,000 that I was speaking about with this anchor VWAP coming up. So probably if we drop in the next days, this would be lining up perfectly with this old point of control. And then that would be really the perfect scenario. If we get a quick wick down to 96,000, take out also $100,000, then I would be interested in this to reverse. And then we would have a very easy setup. We can wait for the reaction here. We can check the order flow, and then we would have stop loss below the wick, targeting, in this case, I, of course, would be aware of, probably by then we would have changed our new level of resistance. But of course, I would be aware of it, but I would not mind keeping this as a swing trade for potentially a new high. This is already getting very long, so I'm not going to cover Ethereum and Solana and whatever other altcoins. But as I showed you, I already am long on Solana. And to be honest, even if we do fill the wick on Bitcoin, I do not feel that we would go and fill the wick on, for example, Solana or stuff like that. I feel like we are holding up pretty well now compared to the drop that we had. So yeah, I'm not too worried, but either way, I did take profit. And I would say that if you are in positions on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, on Solana, on whatever altcoin that you have been able to buy on the drop, and as I've been saying a lot in my Discord, do take profits. Like, prepare for a situation where whatever happens, even if Solana goes back to $100, that you walk away with profits. And that can be trading your stop losses up. It can be taking profits and putting your positions break even. Just make sure that you do not burn your wallets and that you walk away with profit. So yeah, I hope this is very clear on what my next intentions are. Of course, if we lose $96,000, that would really be bad and could actually be that we have shorted the top and that we have entered a mini bear market. Perhaps we could go back to 80,000, 60,000, then we would have to look for much lower targets. But for now, let's focus on this. This would be ideal. I would love for another all-time high to come on Bitcoin. And sorry if there's any mess, but they are doing works outside my house. So remember, I am interested in a short trade on Bitcoin at 117 if we do get this pump. So this is the first. I would potentially be interested in this long if we get the right movement. This is a really complicated one that you really have to understand, and that of course is reactionary. Then I would potentially be interested in this level once again on a reaction. I would potentially be interested in the fill of the wick. And then my preferred scenario would be this one that I have just explained, where we either take out $100,000 right here, or even better, we reach $96,000. The entry probably to this would either be off of a really good reaction on the point of control, and that would be more aggressive onto the anchor VWAP, so something like that, and we have entry right here. Or what we can do is to wait for the fake out of the wick, but that of course would give us a much larger stop loss to have, which is not ideal. Or for example, the reclaim of $100,000. In that case, we can say, okay, we faked out $100,000. Of course, we check order flow. We check if there is a lot of shorts opening here. Remember, what you want to see is a lot of trap shorts when you want to take those longs. And then in that case, we can take our trade. But yeah, I hope this is really clear. I hope that I have taken out some uncertainty that you may have had and that you now feel more safe in this scary market at the moment, I would say. And I will see you in the next update.